Trump Tower's lobby, then police move in. We'll show you what happened next. A federal judge orders the Trump administration to rehire tens of thousands of fired employees, federal employees. The White House promises a legal pushback. Our series on the 5-year anniversary of the coronavirus pandemic looks at why Democrats are now opposing legislation to go after COVID fraudsters. Breaking tonight, Russian President Vladimir Putin is saying he agrees in principle with a U.S. proposal for a 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine, but that the details still need to be worked out. That news comes amid growing discontent here at home over the U.S. economy. President Trump threatening a 200% tariff on alcoholic beverages coming out of the European Union countries. This is in response to a tariff on American whiskey. Wall Street, with all of that back and forth, taking another big hit today. The Dow plunging 537. The S&P 500 was down 78. The Nasdaq plummeted 345. Senior White House correspondent Jackie Heinrich starts us off tonight live from the North Lawn. Good evening, Jackie.
Good evening, Brett. The tariff wars are roiling markets, and it's not over yet. Big importers of Russian oil like India, Spain, France, and Belgium about to get hit with a double whammy after President Trump let a Biden-era sanctions waiver lapse. It will cut into Putin's war machine eventually, but U.S. allies could feel the impact first.
I didn't say we're not concerned. I'm not concerned about a little bit of volatility over 3 weeks.
Another day of market turbulence. Investors unnerved as 25% tariffs on foreign aluminum and steel went into effect, prompting protest from the European Union.
We call on the U.S. to immediately revoke the tariffs.
And retaliation. The EU imposing its own charges on American imports, including bourbon, pitting some in the president's own party against him.
The tariff wars are a big mistake and not good for my state. From bourbon distillers to car manufacturers to the makers of fences to the builders of homes to our farmers. Nobody in Kentucky is coming up to me and say, please put tariffs on things.
Trump, undeterred, now threatening 200% tariffs on all European alcohol and vowing not to back off the reciprocal tariffs on all countries slated for April 2nd.
No, look, we've been ripped off for years, and we're not going to be ripped off anymore.
It comes as oil prices could rise as much as $5 a barrel by one estimate after the president let a key sanctions waiver lapse. Russian General License 8L allowed countries to buy Russian oil with the U.S. dollar and the U.S. payment system. The administration now using it as a negotiation tactic in meetings with Putin to end the war.
We're getting words that things are going okay in Russia, and it doesn't mean anything until we hear what the final outcome is. Now we're going to see whether or not Russia's there, and if they're not, it'll be a very disappointing moment for the world.
Putin agreed to a ceasefire in principle, but not without first getting key concessions to end the war. The same kind of resistance Zelensky put up, which prompted a punishment, halting military aid and intelligence sharing. The question now is whether Trump will have to punish Putin, too.
He put out a very promising statement, but it wasn't complete. And yeah, I'd love to meet with him or talk to him. But we have to get it over with fast. You know, every day people are being killed.
Zelensky calling on Trump to force Putin's hand, saying, quote, "We are not setting conditions that complicate the process. Russia is. As we have always said, the only one stalling, the only one being unconstructive is Russia." Now, President Trump says his administration had been talking with Ukraine about land concessions and many other parts of a final peace agreement, including a power plant that both sides want. But where all that stands hinges on a readout that we are awaiting from Steve Witkoff's meeting with Putin today. Brett.
Jackie Heinrich live on the North Lawn. Jackie, thank you. Also breaking tonight, as we mentioned at the top of the show, protesters upset about the detention of a former Columbia University graduate student accused of organizing anti-Semitic demonstrations occupied the lobby of Trump Tower in New York today. Senior correspondent Eric Shawn shows us what happened from the streets of New York across from the tower. Good evening, Eric.
Good evening, Brett. They chose President Trump's iconic Trump Tower to protest his policies on Israel and to support activist Mahmoud Khalil. The pink marbled first floor atrium was filled with angry chants and protest signs as about 150 demonstrators from the activist group Jewish Voice for Peace took over the lobby for about 2 hours. Police arrested 98 protesters and charged them with trespassing and resisting arrest. They demand the Trump administration release Khalil, the prominent leader of the Columbia University pro-Palestinian demonstrations. Khalil is a legal U.S. permanent resident here on a green card who is married to an American. The White House considers him a threat to U.S. foreign policy by leading a movement that aligns itself with the terrorist group Hamas and has moved to deport him. Experts say Secretary of State Marco Rubio does have the legal right to kick him out.
This is not about free speech. This is about people that don't have a right to be in the United States to begin with. No one has a right to a student visa. No one has a right to a green card, by the way.
But Khalil supporters say that he is being targeted illegally because he opposes President Trump's policies.
We're here in the name of peace, and we're asking for Mahmoud to be released. He was taken illegally by the ICE department. He was kidnapped by the United States government. I don't really understand what Donald Trump's intentions are, and I won't speak for them, but I will say that the impact is causing a lot of harm to people who are asking for peace.
And tonight, Columbia University has announced that it has expelled or suspended some of the students who seized a campus building last year and has even revoked the diplomas of some of them. As for Khalil, tonight he remains in an immigration detention center in Louisiana, pending the outcome of more legal arguments in his deportation case that is set for next week. Brett?
Eric Shawn live in Manhattan. Eric, thanks. A federal judge in San Francisco is ordering probationary federal employees who were fired in the early days of the Trump administration to be rehired. That's causing some pushback from the White House and other corners. Correspondent David Spunt is following this tonight in Washington. Good evening, David.
Brett, good evening to you. This is perhaps the most sweeping court ruling to date, challenging a Trump administration mandate to fire tens of thousands of federal probationary workers, those in their current jobs less than 2 years. This is all part of the Trump-Musk effort to shrink the federal government. The Bill Clinton-appointed federal judge called the government's arguments a, quote, sham, getting visibly upset in a San Francisco courtroom. Judge William Alsup ruled that the government must immediately offer jobs back to terminated employees at the Treasury, Defense, Agriculture, Interior, Energy, and Veterans Affairs departments. According to the Fox News producer in court, Alsup waved his finger at a government lawyer, telling the Justice Department attorney that this case upset him. He called it a, quote, sad day when good employees would be fired on the false claim of poor performance unions. Representing the fired workers celebrated the temporary victory.
It is our duty to make sure that their rights are protected.
All right, let's try this out. Let's see. Let's go to the left, but we need more